So the big news today, the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping of China taking place on the sidelines of the Brics summit happening in Kazan in Russia. Really a lot to unpack in terms of the what the two leaders said, but essentially Prime Minister Narendra Modi talking about the need for stability on the border, as well as for broadly more stability in relations with India and China, which would be very important for global peace and stability. That statement coming out from the Indian Prime Minister, and of course the President of China as well, asking for both countries to improve communication as well as coordination on key issues relating to their bilateral partnership. Joining me now is someone who is perhaps extremely well placed to help us understand what the two leaders have said and what this means for the India-China relationship, as well as some of the dynamics on the line of actual control, is Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan, a army officer with over 40 years of experience in the armed forces, as well as a significant experience in China and handling the India-China border. He is currently adjunct distinguished fellow at the Gateway House. General Narasimhan, thank you so much for joining us. Could you begin by telling us a little bit of what jumped out to you, or did anything stand out to you in terms of the statements made by the two leaders during their meeting in Russia?
Thank you very much for getting me on your show. The first thing that actually impressed me was the meeting itself. The meeting itself has been a long time coming, and that happened because of the agreement reached on the patrolling couple of days ago. And the meeting itself is the start point of probably getting back the relations to normalcy, as the Foreign Secretary was mentioning. That now the legwork starts to get the relationship going, and as he also mentioned that both the leaders have given some directions to both their staff, so that they can start working on this. So this is the positive trend that we need to look at, but I think we also need to have a sense of caution here that it's a long road way back to where it was. So we need to take it one step at a time and then see how things go forward. The other thing is the agreement that was reached 2 days ago on the patrolling part, that almost completes the disengagement, which is the first step in bringing back normalcy in this relationship. And the next step, which is the de-escalation, for that the negotiations will have to start again. And that is going to be, again, probably a little long drawn process. We need to wait patiently and do the needful to negotiate properly.
Understood, sir. Could I ask you to, given your experience, at senior levels in military command, what would the two leaders have talked about when it comes to, managing the border better, as well as leading to this next process of de-escalation on the India-China border? Would they have simply given signals to their respective ministries, as well as their respective political military systems to get going on this? Would they have given political guidance? I wanted to get a sense of some of the specifics that they might have talked about.
You see, at that level, I don't think they are going to give specific directions to the armed forces. At the level of the leadership, they will give general guidelines based on which the people on both the sides have to work out the modalities of implementing it. So to that extent, I am sure some positive signals would have come out of that meeting. And from there onwards, whatever is discussed, once the details come out a little bit more, then we'll be able to make more sense of it. But my own sense is that they would have given general directions on how to take it forward. And it is for both sides, the people, to work it out as to how this is going to go forward.
Understood, sir. One of the things that we've heard, of course, from the Foreign Secretary is that the next round of the talks between the special representatives from the Indian as well as the Chinese side is set to happen soon at an appropriate date. Of course, both leaders also talking about restoring stability on the border and talking about more peace and tranquility on the border zone. So if I could ask you to explain to us how things will likely move forward from here. The Foreign Secretary, of course, also clarifying something that was in the public domain, saying that, look, there is the situation at Depsang and Demchok, two parts of the northern sector where disengagement had not happened, that has been resolved. So if you could explain, to a more general audience, there has been a lot of conversation about the 3Ds, in fact, of disengagement, de-escalation, as well as de-induction. If you could explain now, people, I think, will understand disengagement and, the creation of buffer zones and forces moving away from each other. What would de-escalation look like if you could explain for a general audience, what would a de-escalation, the next step in this process, look like?
Let me put in a few lines on this. When 2020 the Galwan incident happened, then there was a face-off between both the sides, and then that led to almost you know almost to a almost a skirmish starting off. So to avoid that, the first step was to disengage. The disengagement meant that the forces that are facing each other pull back a little bit, so that they don't come face to face, and in the heat of the moment things could go wrong. So to avoid that, disengagement was something that was thought of. So it happened by about September, by about 2022. We had completed this disengagement in four places. That is the Galwan Valley, the PP14 that was called as Galwan Valley, PP15 and PP17, which are called as Gogra and Hot Springs, and then also on the Pankungso Lake, the disengagement had taken place, which meant that the troops had pulled back a little bit. But there are two other places that were under discussion. That is the Depsang, which is to the north of Galwan, and Demchok, which is to the south of Pankungso Lake. These two places had some issues which had to be resolved. That is the one that has been resolved a couple of days ago, by which we mean that we will be able to go back to the patrolling points of 10, 11, 12, 13, which was the access to which was denied after the 2020 Galwan incident. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that basically we can go back to those patrol points. The disengagement simply means that the troops on both the sides pull back a little bit, so that they don't come face to face with them, so that the things should not go wrong. The other thing about the buffer zone that you talked about, we don't call it buffer zone. I mean, some people do call it, but it is a temporary moratorium on patrolling. Basically, again, to ensure that the troops don't come face to face, and then the things should not escalate. So that is the reason why this temporary moratorium on patrolling on those 4 points, which I mentioned to you, PP 14, 15, 16, and 17, were done. And Pankungso Lake also was done. The second step is the de-escalation. And the de-escalation simply means the additional troops which came into this area during the Galwan incident pull back further, so that there is no chance of escalation that could take place. Once that happens, thereafter the de-induction was the third step, which meant all those formations which had moved in to these areas go back to their peacetime locations, and that would end the entire thing of the three-step process. I hope that makes it clear.
No, absolutely. That's crystal clear, I think, in terms of explaining what the three-step process will be. You as well as several other commentators who've handled China before, who have seen what's happened on the border, have urged caution when it comes to dealing with the Chinese. Could you also talk about what some of the pitfalls and some of the challenges will be in negotiating some of the particulars on de-escalation in the weeks and months ahead? There have been, for example, conversations about Chinese-built structures along the line of actual control. Will those be dismantled, and so on and so forth? So if you could also explain why so many commentators, just like yourself, have called for a caution, called for really looking at some of these more difficult questions that continue to remain on how India and China will move forward on this. Could you just explain some of those concerns?
Yeah, the thing is this, once these additional troops moved into these areas, to make them stay, there are a lot of construction that has happened, because those areas are really very cold and windy, and temperatures could go down to minus 30, minus 40 degrees centigrade. And to enable these troops to stay there and then do their job, a lot of construction and other activities have taken place. So those have to be dismantled, and both the sides have to agree to that. And second thing is to how far behind they have to move back is something that is another thing that needs to be negotiated. And again, all these processes have to be in a verifiable manner, so that both the sides are confident that what they had agreed upon has been implemented. So these are the steps. Slowly and steadily we have to start thinking. Location by location it has to be discussed, and see how far behind these troops should move and how it is verifiable. Those things are the discussion that will take place in the next stage, which is again going to be, I'm sure, it's going to be a little hard. And then I'm sure with the sense of direction that has been given by both the leaders, I think there should be some kind of positive movement on that over a period of time.
Understood, sir. So thank you as well for your brevity and the clarity with which you've explained these questions. If I could also ask you, on a point of curiosity from my end, there has been some discussion in the strategic community more generally about India sometimes not particularly knowing exactly why the crisis in Galwan, as well as just the broader movements that we saw in the summer of 2020, took place by Chinese troops. Do you think that that would have featured in the conversation between the two leaders, sort of India trying to tease out what China's motivations were in making those military moves in order that in the future something like this does not repeat itself? Do you have a sense of that as well?
So my take is I don't think they would have got into it because getting into that would have only slowed down the entire meeting into that kind of a thing. I think they would have moved on and discussed how to move forward. I think is that would have been discussed.
And
Chinese themselves have been giving lot many reasons for why it happened, but my own sense, and I've been saying it in many of the interviews I have given earlier, that whatever has happened has happened. Now what we need to look at is how to ensure that such things do not happen again in future, and also to be careful on the line of actual control so that things don't come to a face off and then escalate. I think that is the way things would have gone on. I don't think they would have got into the reason and things like that. That would have only slowed down the entire meeting.
understood, sir. And if I could ask you, in terms of what happens now, what we've seen over the last 4 years is, a gradually increasing tempo of build-up in terms of border infrastructure, as well as military acquisitions, as well as military partnerships with countries around the world, as India has tried to come to terms with this increased threat perception towards its northern neighbor. Do you feel like we have reached a new normal in that relationship with China, regardless of course, diplomatic negotiations and political talks to resolve the crisis on the border? Do you think that India has reached a new normal in terms of its threat perception with the Chinese, and that build-outs of infrastructure as well as plans to modernize the military will continue at the same pace that they have over the last 4 years? Or do you believe that if the threat from China declines on the northern border, then the impetus for that modernization and that infrastructure build-out will also reduce? Where do you stand on that debate?
See, two things we need to understand. One is I don't think there is no new normal as far as this line of actual control or the boundary is concerned. We have our own claims. We'll maintain that and we will fight for it. That is number one. Number two, the infrastructure that was being constructed in the border areas will continue because it is our territory. We need to make ourselves comfortable. The people are living there. They need connectivity. They need other facilities. And also, it will facilitate our troops to be sustain our troops in those areas. So the infrastructure development will definitely continue. And I don't think there's a new normal. We will stick to our claims of line of actual control and the boundary. And I think that is the way we should see it. A new normal was actually a term which came up during Mr. Xi Jinping's time for the kind of economic growth that China was going to go through. The higher level growth was coming down and they were supposed to get used to 5 to 6% growth. That is how the new normal came up. So I don't think we should apply it to ourselves.
Understood. General Narasimhan, thank you so much. I understand that you have been extremely busy today, explaining to the Indian public more generally the implications of what we have seen in terms of this patrolling deal, as well as the big meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time, for explaining some of these issues, and for giving us the benefit of your experience. And thank you so much, viewers, for watching India Today Global as we unpack this monumental meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping in Russia. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.